Hey everybody, Coach Keith Kepner here. I'm going to run through the most universal form of training you can do for boxing. What is that? You guessed it. It's shadow boxing. Something that everyone says you should do, everyone knows you should do, like I covered in that one video review I did of a coach. A lot of people definitely do it wrong, but it's definitely something that you need to do. Why? Because it is truly a universal form of training. The universal form of training. What I mean by universal means you can do it anywhere. You have no excuse to not do it. And like I tell many of my guys, I've had people who have been busy with work for months, who have even been locked up in jail for months, and they come out, and if they've been doing this universal training called shadowboxing, they come out and they're actually better. And if they don't, they come out where they left off, or they come out worse. All right. Now, why? Why is shadowboxing important? We're going to get into all of those elements in detail. It's not all the reasons that maybe you think it is, or you've heard, perhaps, if you're newer to boxing. Even if you've been around for a long time, more and more people share with me how, they've done, really, it's a funny type of thing to think about. They've done their first year for 10 years. It's an important thing to think about. Do you do that with boxing or with anything else? Do you do your first year over and over and over again? What do I mean by that? Where you never go past that level, right? You're just going over the same stuff over and over again. You're not truly making any breakthroughs, any real progress. And, sure, you've been boxing for 10 years, but you've really been boxing 1 year for 10 years. Or with coaching. I've definitely seen this where people will be a coach for even just like 5 years, and they'll really progress amazingly fast and go and literally are 5x or more a better coach. Some people, they coach for 5 years and they're no better than they were 6 months into it. All right, so make sure you stick around though to the end, because I'm going to give you the exact tool that you're missing in your shadowboxing to make it optimal, or to make it the best it can be, so you can use it to your advantage. Shadowboxing is the place. Really sparring is the lab, right? But shadowboxing is kind of like the factory, right? The factory where you produce and really like almost it's where you get what you need to get to produce it before you go out and you test it on the track, right? Imagine that like with race cars. Shadowboxing is really your time in the factory building the race car, and then you going out and testing it on the track is your sparring. Now, so make sure you stick around for that at the very end, because no matter what your problem is, I'm going to hit all the major points and what you can do in your shadowboxing to make those things better, what you're missing. All right? But talking about with shadowboxing, why? 4 categories that we typically shadowbox: to warm up, to cool down, for skill acquisition, and for conditioning. Do you shadowbox for conditioning? And I know immediately you might be thinking I'm talking about using weights, right? Putting like 2, 3, 5-pound dumbbells. I hope you're not doing more than 5-pound dumbbells in your hands for shadowboxing. You might be thinking about that for conditioning. Sure, that's a fine thing to do at the end. It's also limiting, and also as well, you can condition with just your dang boxing gloves, or even no boxing gloves. But I would prefer you do use either 10-ounce gloves, let's say if you're fighting, 12-ounce gloves, or 14 or 16-ounce gloves when you shadow box. But we're going to jump into each one of these items. Let's talk about the skill acquisition form of shadow boxing and really define it, because it's really important that we define our terms. Because when we tend to not define our terms, we tend to lose sight of what's really important. All right, so skill acquisition, this is the process through which individuals learn and refine motor skills. All right, so we're acquiring the skills, we're refining them. You have 3 basic stages of them. The first one is the cognitive stage, right, where it's taking all of your focus to learn it, right? So you're learning the basics and understanding what to do. And this is obviously where shadowboxing becomes very important, because you need to learn how to, or at least the concepts of how to throw a punch, right? Everyone can throw a punch a little bit different and still have success with it, but some basic concepts and foundational pieces that I'm not going to go over in this video on how to throw a punch, how to move your body defensively. All right, but so you're really just getting those understandings down. Or I've had this happen where we go to this stage with someone that's been boxing for, again, they've been doing 10 years of boxing, but they maybe only done their first 3 years, and they've done that 3 times, right? Now, the next stage is the associative stage. And now, again, to be clear, like that cognitive stage where we're learning the basics, understanding what to do, that's where it's very closed training, meaning what? You're working on like a one, right? Jab, boom. You're working on like a double jab, getting the feet with it. A double jab, a right hand, right? And really just getting some of those pieces, how we move our feet with our jab, right? How we move our hips and our shoulders as we throw basic punches. And then how we move our body with basic defense, whether it be head movement or hand defense, all right? Then the associative stage, where we're practicing and refining the skill, right? So you're adding in more elements. And think about associate versus disassociate, right? You are being mindful with your work, because that's also how you ensure that you don't do your first year 10 times or 20 times, right? And you're no better than you were at the end of your first year of boxing, and now you're 20 years into it. I've seen this happen, guys, so watch out for it. Then the last one is the autonomous stage, where you can really just think of being like autonomous, like operating on your own. It's almost the unconscious stage of skill acquisition, where you're performing the skill automatically with little conscious thought, if almost any. Getting to almost that flow type stage of your shadow boxing. And we're going to go deeper into that. But obviously this applies to your boxing as well. Your cognitive stage, where you're learning the basics, understanding what to do. You learn this in obviously your shadow boxing. And then when you're associative stage, we're practicing refining skills. We do that in the shadow boxing and a little bit in sparring. And then hopefully we can start doing this more and more throughout our training on those underlying pillars, and then apply that to our sparring and our fighting in the autonomous stage. All right. Now with conditioning, how is shadow boxing conditioning? So conditioning, obviously defining our terms, refers to physical training that enhances performance, focuses on strength, endurance, flexibility, and overall fitness. Now, to be clear, that one term, flexibility, think about flexibility as it applies to the sport of boxing. You do not need to be able to hyperextend your joints. You do not be able to go through some crazy wacko range of movement, right? You don't need to be even able to touch your toes, because the range of movement required for boxing is not in that gross size movement. So, but again, there may be certain things to consider with injuries and things like that, or rehab type stuff that you might want to consider, some things with flexibility. But working on becoming overly flexible outside of the necessary requirements of your sport is unnecessary. All right. Anyway, and overall fitness. All right. So 3 pieces of that: aerobic conditioning, so improving cardiovascular endurance. Shadowboxing, excellent way to do that, because when you shadowbox at a hard pace, throwing punches, you do not need weights to do this. Put on some boxing gloves, or do it with no boxing gloves if that's your situation. When you throw and do it properly, like we're going to talk about later, it is absolutely aerobic conditioning. Missing punches is the hardest thing you can do as a fighter, outside of getting the hell beat out of you, right? I would argue getting the hell beat out of you is way worse than missing punches, right? I'd rather miss punches all day than get freaking clocked and just nailed and concussed and ribs broken and all that. But so we will say it's the second thing, hardest thing you can do in boxing is missing punches. Strength training increases muscular strength and power. Shadowboxing does this. It builds up the muscles in the back that you need to help you with power, but also help you when you miss punches. All right. When you shadowbox properly, like I'm going to talk about later in this video, you're going to feel sore in places you've never felt sore before when you do it properly. All right. Then agility training. All right. So again, we're hitting all the aspects of basic, what is considered conditioning, agility training with shadowboxing. So does that mean we need a ladder to shadowbox? Because that's agility, right? We oftentimes think tools that are assisting tools are the thing, right? We'll think agility training, like, dude, you need hurdles and you need cones and you need ladders and you need a ball that you stick to your forehead, or you need lasers that bounce off the walls, or like little buttons that light up. That's agility training, right? No. So let's talk about those. So what is agility training? It's enhancing speed and coordination. Well, you do that with shadowboxing. Learning to not fire the antagonist muscles and only firing the muscles required to perform the movement, right? If you're trying to extend your arm and you're contracting your bicep muscles, you're not going to be able to extend your arm very well or very quick. The more you can relax the bicep muscles while contracting the tricep muscles as quickly as possible, having that motor recruitment as quickly as possible, you're going to increase the speed of your arm extension. Of course, combine that with some shoulder and whatever else you use with that, whether it's a step or a rotation on the body, is going to equal more speed with your punches, greasing the groove of your movement patterns. Coordination, balance is what comes to mind with the coordination factor. Being able to throw punches hard with maximum effort, maximum speed, not hurt yourself, be on balance to either continue throwing, throw up the follow-up punch, throw the follow-up punch, or to react defensively to a counter off of the miss, right? Because that's two things to consider with missing. You miss, you need to be able to. A lot of great knockouts come off of somebody missing a punch and following back with a punch after they missed their punch and landing that one. It torques them for more power. Also, a lot of times when somebody misses, they stop. So like if we're boxing right now and you miss a punch, it's going to be fairly likely, most people, they're going to stop when they miss a big hook versus come back with a right hand or a jab or whatever. So therefore, in that moment, I'm like, yeah, because also we admire our work, right? Taking a picture. And we not only take pictures when we land punches, but we also sometimes take pictures when we miss punches or make people miss punches. And also when we miss them ourselves. But yeah, sometimes you'll block a punch nicely, slip it, and you're like, yeah, I did a great job. And you're not thinking about what's coming after that. Or looking to use that miss to counter, right? To make them pay. So very important stuff. Let's talk about the warm-up aspects of shadowboxing. Again, I'm going to chunk shadowboxing down to 3 categories and go deep into each one of those. So make sure you stick around for that as we get into it. All right, but as far as warming up, so how is shadowboxing? And again, to be clear, categorically, people think of shadowboxing as a warm-up, right? Or maybe a cool-down. But I just want to be clear of all the boxes that it does check and how it truly is a universal training aspect or methodology. So warm-up. A warm-up prepares the body for physical activity, reducing risk of injury. It usually includes dynamic stretching, so movements that increase the heart rate and warm up muscles, so like leg swings and arm circles. And to be clear, those are important things to do, like I talked about in my strength training video, I think, or on my video on getting loose, which you should check out. Utilizing that to help you loosen up. But also shadowboxing does that. I'm going to talk about that in the first stage of shadowboxing. Light aerobic activity, obviously, that's how most people shadowbox, is lightly, right? So absolutely falls under light aerobic activity requirements. And then cool down. So cool down helps the body transition back to a resting state after exercise. It typically includes static stretching, so something not really needed for boxing because we're not looking to expand the flexibility of our joints. There's really nothing that comes to mind where you want to expand the flexibility of your joints with boxing specifically. Maybe perhaps the one thing you could make an argument for is maybe torso rotation, like transverse rotation. That's about it. Everything else, maybe you could say a little bit with the shoulders, but again, we're not talking about hyper flexibility. We're talking about just going through basic standard ranges of motion. Then light activity. So under cool down, light activity, gradually lowering the heart rate. So walking. Good thing to put at the end of your workout is to do some shadow boxing to kind of just cool down. Because think about it as well. I think about it in terms of something more simple than boxing, as far as like technically, there's less variables, is running, right? When people run, and you run races and things like that, road races, you don't just like finish your race and then just stop. You cool down. You run to help the metabolic byproduct circulate through your body, right? Things like lactic acid and everything else, you want to get the blood still flowing to help hopefully reduce your recovery time for your next workout or from that event. So therefore shadowboxing becomes very important for that. Because guess what? Through shadowboxing, properly, we're going to be going through all the movements, helping increase blood flow in all the areas that we were creating any type of, damage or strain on or anything else like that. So very important stuff. All right, so 3 types of shadowboxing. Let's dive into it. It's really important to take something that is very complex and to obviously be able to go into the nuances and the details on it, because sometimes that's where our biggest revelations come from, but to also chunk it into some basic pieces to help us more easily use it, right? Think about that with, for instance, tools, like tools that you use to, do repairs and things like that. You have categories of that, and within each category, there's a lot of nuance and things like that for what might be more effective for the certain type of job. But still, you need these overarching macro categories. All right. So the first one is the one that everybody knows. All right. And again, most people stay right here in shadowboxing as a warm up and a cool down. And that's fine. I mean, it's not fine they stay there, but it's fine and great that they do that. It's very important, actually, as I touched on a moment before, to utilize it for this. But again, to be clear, they're doing 1/3 of what they could be doing, and they're doing that for their whole entire boxing existence. And so you're missing out on 2/3 of the gains that could be had, and then also therefore multiplied over time. Really powerful stuff. So happy to share this stuff with you. All right, so with the warming up aspect, all right, it's priming. It's getting yourself ready for the activity, getting yourself ready for what specifically? For ensuring relaxation. Right? So when you're and when we're warming up shadow boxing, that is when we're just kind of flipping our hands out there. Again, what you see your favorite fighter do a lot of times, where they're just kind of flowing out shots, and it's not really, doesn't look like they're really thinking that much. This is the type of shadow boxing they're doing. They're warming up. They're ensuring relaxation. And they're also increasing blood flow, everything else that we saw talked about with the definition of warming up. Now, B, talking about the cool down aspect of this category of shadow boxing, the warming up and cooling down, slowing things back down. All right? So, almost in a sense, reinforcing technique. All right? So, you went through your hard workout, let's say, and you're going to cool down not only for the reasons stated earlier, for the reasons of cooling down, but also to just continue to grease the groove of technique, of proper mechanics of that skill acquisition that we're looking to obtain and create automatically or autonomously. All right? Now, the second type of shadow boxing, something that is not done very much at all. I'm not going to say it's not done. I'm not going to be one of these YouTube guys that I poke at that say, no one ever does this, right? People definitely do it, and good people do it. Some good people don't do it, all right? Important thing to keep in mind, because you will see people who will do a lot of things like wrong with their training, but they will beat the hell out of you, all right? Are they wrong? I mean, if you can't argue with the results, but of course the question comes, is that going to work for most people, right? And that's something we need to identify for ourselves. Is something that a fighter that you're modeling yourself after, something they do, something that's actually going to be beneficial for you at your stage as well, but for you specifically, whatever stage, is that same type of training, whatever, going to be beneficial? Something you got to ask yourself. But anyway, so technical shadowboxing, very, very important, and typically very, very much underutilized. All right, so let's go into details on that. So what makes good technical shadowboxing, right? Because you could say technical shadowboxing, that can be a whole wide range of things, and people are going to be like, goodness knows what type of random associations you could put with what would be qualified as good technical shadowboxing, right? So full movement is one of the keys to good technical shadowboxing. Full movement, all right? So again, we've gone past our warm-up types and our cool-down types, all right? We're talking about we want full extension, we want full rotation, and we want full squeeze, all right? Let's go into each one of these three pieces, all right? So full extension, does that mean I'm saying you should, when you throw a straight punch, lock your arm out on the elbow joint so it's like this, so it's literally hyperextended, or almost hyperextended, all the way straightened out, just like you would if you were to do a deadlift, right? No. So, and this is important stuff for people to learn, and this is why technical shadowboxing is so important, because when you're used to hitting a bag all the time or hitting a mitt all the time, then when you spar, I've seen it happen. Guys miss a punch and they're used to really extending their arm too much, and their elbows get hurt, etc., etc. All right, because they have an external force stopping them versus being able to use their own arm to stop the punch. And when you focus on, and it kind of relates to the squeeze part, so kind of going from the first item to the last item, when you're snapping at the end of your punch and locking tight, making a tight fist and locking the arm, flexing it before it hyperextends out all the way, that's going to demand a lot more of your muscles that you might not be used to acquiring or to activating when you are hitting a bag, believe it or not, right? Sure, you probably are going to you're probably going to squeeze fairly tight when you hit a bag, because or else you're going to feel it and you're going to hurt yourself. But as far as tightening up the rest of the arm to stop it from going on the elbow joint, that is something else as well that might not be getting developed as far as strength and conditioning wise in your shadowboxing. So that's where doing technical shadowboxing, getting full extension to the point where you're not just doing half punches, right? You're doing full punches that are the proper amount, all right? They're not too far, they're not too little, they're the proper amount with jabs and right hands or twos, ones and twos. And then full rotation. So a lot of times people throw let's say their hooks or their twos, and they're not fully rotating their body. Does that mean I'm saying every single punch you ever throw when you box needs to have full massive rotation? No, I'm not saying that, right? But if all you ever practice is minimal rotation of the core and the shoulders with your punches, then you're going to be missing out on a lot of the power that you could be having, all right? And then as well, when you do choose to do a full rotation, your balance is going to suffer, all right? So like one way I like to talk about it with shooting a two, like if you're orthodox, a right hand, or if you're southpaw, a left hand, is to focus on your lead shoulder, pulling back all the way so that you end up, as far as your upper body is concerned, in the opposite stance, right? So you go from being like this, sided up, to all the way turned, so you're like that with your upper body. And if you shadowbox properly, you're able to do that. It's going to maximize your range of the punch, because obviously, right? But then also it minimizes how much you need to lean with it to land the punch. And then it maximizes that rotational torque and power that we're going to achieve. And when you do this enough and often enough, you'll be amazed at, one, how you can miss punches and be on balance, but then two, and therefore return fire or defensively react, but then two, massively increase your conditioning, because you miss a punch and it's not the end of the world. It's not this like energy zapping thing as much as it once was, because why? The body's become more adapted to it. Isn't that a wonderful thing? All right, and then the full squeeze at the end. One of the biggest things that a lot of folks miss on, and this is where I jump back to the priming stage of the warm-up phase of shadowboxing, right? Section 1 of shadowboxing, is that oftentimes with this one, the focus is relaxation. So therefore, you actually don't probably want to focus on squeezing your punch. Or you want to maybe minimize how tight you squeeze, because we are trying to fight what is natural. What is natural in boxing, and when we typically move our arms, is tension. More often than not, people push their punches. What does push mean versus throw? Push means there's tension throughout the entire movement, versus throw is more of a whipping, relaxation type movement. At the end, you squeeze tight. So like Chuck Bodak would say, it's like throwing a baseball in a guy's face, but at the end, you catch a baseball. But when we're pushing, it's typically, humans are not made to punch. We're made to push, to slap, and to throw things, right? But punching is a weird combo of things. And, we're not, evolutionarily, people didn't really, or, monkeys or whatever the hell didn't really punch, right? So people will tend to push. And so that's where, when you tend to warm up, the focus needs to be relaxation, because the tendency to tighten the arms too much, tighten the shoulders, the traps, and everything else, and that can come from also trying to squeeze the end of the punch, is going to be detrimental to you priming yourself for snappy punches. All right? But then once we are in our technical phase of shadowboxing, getting that lock right at the end, because that lock and that squeeze at the end is almost all that you need to jar someone's brain, to bounce the brain, the skull, and cause the concussion that you want to create in your opponent. And the better you are at that turnover of the straight punch and things like that, but then that hard grab right at the end, the more it is a jar, a shaking of their brain. And we want to do that. That's part of the sport of boxing. All right? It's like hitting, I know very little about many sports, but I guess it's like with baseball, it's like hitting that ball with the bat at the right place, right? In the right timing. That's what you're practicing when you're snapping your punches. And if you're not practicing that, you are either relying on a little bit of the benefits of other forms of training, but also maybe just a natural ability. And also, if you don't have that natural ability, you might not be a hard puncher, and you say, I'm just not a hard puncher. No, your practice makes a difference. All right, now, mirror work. This falls under still technical shadowboxing. We're still in just number 2, right? So we went through number 1, which is the warm-up and the cool-down type shadowboxing. Now we're still in technical shadowboxing, mirror work. I included pictures of a lot of champions. And to be clear, maybe some of these pictures are done for just publicity, right? Because that's something I want to be hard on as well, is that just because we have a picture of a guy doing it doesn't mean it's like the thing that you need to do or should do or is the way you should do it, right? Because for all many reasons, which I've gone into in other videos. But regardless, you have guys like Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Robinson in the bottom, Rocky Marciano. You have Marvin Hagler, which is covered up by the word mirror. I'm sorry, Mr. Hagler. May you rest in peace. Joe Frazier, Reuben Hurricane Carter. And so these guys, there's a reason why a mirror was in the gym. And it's funny, I've seen this like with martial arts guys where, don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm sure probably if you're a martial art guy, you know what I'm talking about. But I've seen sometimes people that are not steeped in, I guess, a certain upbringing of martial arts, or not steeped in upbringing of being brought up in specifically boxing, particularly boxing with a lineage and a heritage behind it. They underappreciate the mirror, and they won't put a mirror in their gym, and it's really funny. It's really funny because they think it's just the mirror in the gym is there for you know for aesthetics, for you to look at yourself, for your ego, and obviously as well, it does have a psychological effect on people, right? It allows you to, like, for instance, I think about with Muhammad Ali, I think it was Angelo Dundee was talking about how when he would put a lot of more mirrors in the gym, right, it would help Ali get in shape because he would see himself and he would get motivated by seeing himself getting in better shape. The changes in his body. So, I mean, that's a whole nother aspect. But as far as the topic that we're on, which is technical shadowboxing, it allows you to see what is right, what is wrong, when you do it, and when you don't do it. It allows you to almost coach yourself. It's phenomenal stuff. Once you know what to do, it is your automatic feedback tool. Before the age of cameras, video, right? Phones where you can film everything on it, this was the thing. And again, it's still the thing because, heck, it's an easy setup. It's just a mirror. And it's instant feedback. Now, there's many ways to work with the mirror. I can't go into all of them, but obviously, in some of the ways we see demonstrated here where guys are at different angles on the mirror. Sometimes you're facing the mirror like you're boxing yourself to watch for certain things technically, right? Hand position, rotation, where the feet are. Sometimes you're watching yourself from the side, like you see in the top there where Carter is. Because let's say you have a habit of dropping your right hand when you shoot a left hook. So if you face like how he is to the mirror with it on your right side, then you face where an imaginary opponent would be. You shoot 1, 2, 3, and on the 3 you look at yourself, you see where your right hand is, right? It gives you that immediate feedback. And then oppositely, conversely, going the other way, having the mirror on your left side and facing somebody like they're still in front of you and shooting a 1, 2, looking at where your left hand is and where your 3 is coming from. Is it dropping or looping down? And obviously you can see that from the front side as well. Also, from a side view in the mirror, you can see where your weight is, right? Is it relatively even? Is it falling too much forward? Are those different things with that? Is your foot too far back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Watching your feet as you move, right? Get that immediate feedback. So you're not relying on your coach's eye, right? Because coaches are important. They're essential. But let's not make them more essential than they have to be. And this comes from someone who's a coach. I want every boxer to have all the tools they can have so that they can succeed, so truly they can take their passion for the sport of boxing and get to whatever level they want to, because they have the knowledge and they have the tools. And obviously as well, if you're someone who's just getting into coaching or something like that, or just looking to maybe you've been coaching for a long time and having a different approach or remembering something you might have forgot. Because man, like I've said in other videos, if we just simply did everything, if we simply remembered everything that we know and implemented it consistently, we would all be a lot better than we are. All right, now I'm still talking about technical shadow boxing. All right, this is the biggest chunk because obviously this is the biggest benefit, or one of the biggest benefits. Because you can warm up many ways. I argue shadowboxing is one of the best ways to warm up, and one of the best ways to cool down. Maybe you could say maybe jog or something like that's good too, but this is the big topic, is technical shadowboxing. Now, drills. Talk about combo drills, movement drills, and defensive drills. So what does that mean? Without going into every single possible drill you could do, or my favorites, combinations, knowing how to put your punches together. This applies to a 1-2, a 1-1-2, a 1-3-2, that type of stuff, a 4-3, 4-3-2. But this also applies to, for instance, going to the body, finishing at the head, right? Maybe starting at the head, going to the body, finishing at the head, right? And then obviously movement drills. This could apply to just simply side steps, moving forward, moving backwards, creating circles, and then also defense as well, where you're going to maybe catch a jab and slip a right hand, or you're maybe going to dip a shot and come back with some punches, right? You're going to, for instance, step out of something, shoot some punches. You're going to block, counter with a shot, block 2 shots, counter, etc., etc. Many ways you can use this, but you want to be thinking in terms of how you put your punches together, how you're moving your body, and also what you're doing defensively, and creating drills based around that. And this is where, if you consider joining level 2, that's something that I can definitely help you with. And I'm probably going to put out more videos for members specifically in regards to that. All right, but drills. That wraps that. Let's go to other techniques we can do with shadowboxing that's technical. So level 2 shadowboxing or section 2 shadowboxing. Missing mitts. All right, it's a big thing. It's funny. I know I've experienced this during my time in boxing, where you make someone miss. Or I've actually heard, I think, people, mitt holders, right? Coaches. That's kind of mean to be like that, but whatever. Anyway, saying make sure your partner doesn't miss the punch, or make sure, you're there for it so you can catch it so they don't hurt themselves. I was like, well, maybe. Because, I work with a lot of different people, and I work with people as well that aren't fighters, so I completely understand. We built our business off of working out with beginners that are not. Most of them aren't going to fight. But but this is where I am a purist, where it's like, no matter who you are, you need to be able to throw a hard punch and miss a hard punch. There's a benefit just as far as the strength that it builds and the coordination that it builds for you, whether or not you want to box at all. But then obviously there's a dramatic benefit and importance for you as a boxer. But so, for instance, me holding mitts for someone, it also allows me to see what's going on technically, right? Because you can tell someone to shadow box and throw hard, maximum rotation, squeeze tight in the other punches, etc., 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 etc. But there's a part of our mind, our subconscious, which is a little bit lazy, and that that there's not something in front of you that you're trying to hit hard, that doesn't give you immediate feedback that you are hitting hard or not. So therefore, that changes things. So if I say, give me a 1, 2, 3, and I go boom, boom, bam, and let's do it again, 1, 2, 3, and I go boom, boom, and I make you miss the 3 at the last moment, I'm going to get more data on how you are actually trying to produce power with your 3. You're going to feel where your balance is, how much you are on balance or how much you aren't. We're also going to be able to identify too, maybe if it's more the arm is leading too much and the body isn't leading at all. Many, many, many things, all right? Or with even a jab, right? Like jab, boom, jab, and you make them miss it. Easy way to see if someone's leaning, because think about how important that is for you as a fighter. If you tend to lean with your jab, obviously you're going to smother a lot of your other work if you miss the jab, but then also you're falling right into some easy counters like the uppercut, which we don't want to make available. All right. Missing the bag purposely. So common drill that I see a lot now, but I didn't see it a lot 10 years ago is like missing a right hand on a bag and coming back with a hook, right? Or you could miss a hook, come back with a right hand. Purposely, is to get that used, to get the muscles in the body and the mind used to, I'm going to miss a maximally rotated punch to set up another punch. And what's so cool about that is that setup punch or follow-up punch is going to be harder because you're really torqued for it. All right, it's a big benefit. Then certain marks or set parameters. All right, so what do I mean by that? That falls under mirror work. It falls under a lot of things that we could do. So like as far as mirrors go, I know there's like the products with like there's squares and stuff in it, and maybe buy that if you have if you make $100 million a year, or you take painter's tape and put it up on a mirror. Different shapes you could create, whether it's the boxes or like a triangle for your head movement, let's say, or even as a point to just get your head offline, like a line to help you with your slipping, or even shooting for specific targets. You could also have external things outside of the mirror that help you keep your technique in certain form. So let's say it's like a rope and you're jabbing over the rope, and so therefore there's not the drop down or the come up or anything like that. Or same thing with a hook, let's say, to make sure you're not looping the hook as you're shooting it. And also as well, let's say you have something touching your right hand, like you're up against the wall or something like that, and you can feel if you pull it back or drop it because it moves on the wall before it goes. Little things like that are helpful. I just hit a small amount of examples of that, but there's a lot of ways you can be creative and actually beneficial to technique with different marks or set parameters or closed conditions, so you can only do something within a certain. And that's actually to lead me to kind of the motor learning ideas and concepts. A benefit as well is that to think about as far as with coaches, but also with yourself, how can we, for athletes, design circumstances where the athlete has a certain confined way to accomplish something, but they can within that set area they can have creativity for how they accomplish it, right? To experiment, to kind of find what might work best for their body. It's an interesting idea and concept, but how can we set up practices where an athlete can experiment a little bit and see what might be most optimal after they've built up the foundational basics. All right, quick stop here to say, like I mentioned earlier, consider becoming a channel. Don't be a child. Well, grow out of being a child. Being a channel member. So when you go to the channel page, you see that join button. See, a few people have become members. Awesome. And click join. Do level 2, because that's where you can send me your sparring and training footage, and I'll give you feedback just like this, a video just like this on your technique and everything else, breaking it down for you. And then also, great way to support, if you don't want to do that, is go on the video, see where it says thanks with the heart and the dollar sign, drop a super thanks or whatever it is. And for instance, here's one person, LF, dropped $9.99. Freaking amazing. Awesome. So, really appreciate the support. It's a way to really help the channel and contribute. All right. So now we're going to level 3. Make sure you stick around, by the way, for when I'm going to talk about the specific tools that are going to help you with whatever it is that you're struggling with shadowboxing, or whatever you're struggling with in general, and how we can have shadowboxing help you. All right, so level 3, here it is. What's level 3? This is the last level. Open shadowboxing. All right, open shadowboxing. So what does that mean? This is the shadowboxing that in that video I did where the guy was trying to say shadowboxing is, you shouldn't shadowbox or whatever. This is the type of shadowboxing that he was talking about. This was the type of shadowboxing he was saying that like you have to have a lot of experience to do. Correct. Like for open shadowboxing, to do it properly and to do it fully, you do need to have experience in the ring a little bit, right? And it could just be from some sparring sessions, and really taking what it is that you're struggling with, and plugging in there and working on the answers that you and your coach work on, and or also working on the things that you do well and doing what would be the follow-up after that. All right, so I'll give you an example. For me, I would, being a guy that really into Joe Frazier and stuff like that, I would definitely find a home for my big left hook, right? But obviously, like a lot of us know, after a big left hook, we could do even better things if we would follow that up, whether it be with a right hand or maybe we go down for the body afterwards and come back up top. So recreating the same feel and conditions of a sparring session where you would be throwing, let's say, like a big left hook, or maybe a really hard jab that you're great at landing, or a hard right hand, whatever it is that you actually do well when you spar, and then following up with the logical conclusions, and or let's say dealing with someone's movement, right? Whether it be working on cutting off the ring, or just jumping ahead here real quick. Yes, so we're gonna get to those exact tools in a second. Working on cutting off the ring, that's a big one, right? So changing directions as you cut someone off along the ropes, or working on evading, right? And shooting punches as you evade. One thing comes to mind for a more higher level that I've worked on with a few of my guys that need it is kind of walking around the ring and throwing punches out of position when it looks like they're not ready for it, right? That's just like kind of like a way more advanced thing to do, but it's still an important thing to be able to do. And then, jabbing, moving with the jab, and also all the while remembering that you are not boxing a bag, right? You are not boxing, just some inanimate object. You are actually boxing a person that also wants to win, that is throwing punches. And that is something time and time again that we all need to remember when we shadow box, is that you are preparing to box somebody that also wants to beat the hell out of you. And that applies two ways to how you train when you shadow box with open shadow boxing. Number 3 is you need to throw your punches with mean intentions. Mean intentions. Put that snap, that squeeze, that jaw shaking snap at the end of the punch. That's one thing. With maximal rotation, even though you know it's not landing. Because if you can throw a punch with maximum power and know it's not going to land, then when you think it might, you're not going to pull anything off of it. It's going to be more powerful. So throwing those punches with mean intentions and snapping, rotating the body and everything else, learning how to do that, build the conditioning to do it. And then again, it doesn't have to be every single punch, but at least being able to do that for a combination or within a combination, versus just kind of always doing throwaway punches. And then the next is, though, the second way that applies is that dealing with somebody who is trying to do the same thing to you. So reacting with quick defensive movements, quick head movements, quick blocks that also you counter the counter. You counter inside of shots. You shut them up with whether it's your movement, smothering them down, stepping out, or interrupting them with your combination. All right? A lot of things we could go into in this section, but those are the broad strokes that I know are going to help the most folks. All right. Now, the exact tool you're missing in your shadowboxing that is going to help you. All right. There's some major chunks here which are going to cover 80% of people. All right. You might be that special 20, but 80% this is going to cover. All right. So, not hurting people. I kind of touched on this a lot throughout this whole video, but if you are not hurting people, and I know obviously, like when we spar with our own team, we don't necessarily want to hurt each other because we're all the same team and we want to build up each other as team members, because the more you have good guys at your weight class in your gym, the better you're going to be, right? So trying to stick within that 75, 80-ish range of power. But whether it's in sparring or in fights, if you're not hurting people, sure, bag work, sure, some different things. But shadow boxing, and like I mentioned earlier, maximally rotating the body, throwing your whole weight behind a punch and behind your punches, putting them together, because like I talked about in the power video, it's like, everyone has a number, meaning a code to break them. We're all human beings. And we all are mortal, all right? Everyone has a code to break them. And you might be punching the wrong numbers in the code, or you might be stopping a few numbers short, right? You have a 5-digit code that you need to punch in to open up the door, right? Or to self-destruct the enemy you have in front of you. But you're only punching 3. You're only punching 1. So often I see that with fighters where they'll be doing the first 1 or 2 punches that they need to do to get someone out of there, and it has an effect. It's like, I see it, and they see it afterwards, where it's like, man, if we put the 3rd punch, the 4th punch, it's done. And if it's 5, it's like a complete done deal. Like that becomes excessive now, right? So that's where you work on it, is with your shadow boxing, putting the right punches together that create the right openings. And remember, harder punches create better openings. All right? Not that there isn't such thing as a throwaway punch, right? You can do a throwaway left hook to set up a right hand 100%. But guess what? If you shot that left hook really hard earlier, then they're going to react more and open up more. It's going to set up the right hand. Or even if you just throw a hard hook, they're going to react more, and that opens up another path for the right hand, and arguably might create more torque for that right hand to follow up. Right? Those are very important things to think about. All right, so that's the answer for you there. Now, are you getting hit too much? Again, as you've gone through this video, hopefully you actually have the answers now, right? As you've been listening to this whole thing or watching this whole thing, you actually have the answers if you didn't. Getting hit too much. I've had plenty of people get hit too much. Guess what? When they start working on shadowboxing, their defense, all of a sudden now, just like their technique with their punches, their technique with their defense improves. It's unnatural things to use our hands, our arms, our head movement, and our feet to avoid punches. But if we practice the things we get hit by, defending that in shadowboxing, you will stop getting hit by them. Of course, you have to be aware. Don't do your first month for the next 12 months. You've only been boxing for a month, let's say, or 2 months. That's been 2 months. Awesome. Let's not repeat those 2 months. So you notice, hey, I get caught by right hands. Let me practice my defense of right hands. And also, let me be aware of what they might be doing that sets up that right hand, or what they might be countering of you that creates an opening for the right hand. All right? That's where it comes to filming your sparring is very important. And, not to post on social media, but so you can watch yourself. All right? And then also having the watchful eye of a coach and things like that. And also just going back through and being mindful. Obviously, it's going to be hard initially if you're new to boxing to be aware of a lot of things going on. But with time, you'll become more in the moment and present mentally when you're boxing. And you'll be able to identify these things and take them back into the workshop and work on them. All right? But so many people do not practice their shadow box, their catching and blocking and slipping and things like that, and their defense suffers because of it. All right, are you flat-footed? Right? Do you tend to stay in one spot? Again, if you've been listening throughout this whole thing, you know the answer now. It's been given to you. It's come out from yourself. You shadow box the movement. You shadow box it, and you integrate that into your punches. Maybe you throw your punches and then you move. A basic simple thing is to help you just build patterns of movement is if you finish with a right hand, move to your right. If you finish with a left hand, move to your left. Is that always going to be the case? Is that always the perfect answer? No. But it's a good way that when you're shadow boxing and you're having trouble kind of putting this together, okay, let me make this whole round or this whole shadow boxing session. When I finish with a left hand punch, I'm going to go left. When I finish the right hand punch, I'm going to go right. And that's an easy way to help get yourself to not be so flat-footed. And again, done over enough time, it becomes more automatic and will just apply to your sparring and your fighting without you even thinking about it. All right, are you getting gassed? If you're getting gassed, you probably are not shadowboxing hard. This is where you need to focus on hitting a punch number when you shadowbox in open shadowboxing. Or it could even be drill shadowboxing, but open is even better because then you also have to think while you're getting gassed, which is also like a thing as well that happens is it's hard to think when you're getting gassed. So we got to build those two abilities together. But you set a punch count number. I'm going to throw 100 jabs in every single round. All right? Really, it could be more. But to give you an idea, like within a 3-minute round, you should be hitting 250 punches. 300 punches within that round where you're rotating your body. You're snapping those punches out there. And when you shadow box like that for even just 3 or 4 rounds, that's going to, over a few weeks even, going to help increase your conditioning when you actually box. Now, we're wrapping it up for the video. Make sure you click like if you haven't already, and make sure you click subscribe. Most people that watch this are not subscribed. We're already at like 11,600 subscribers. That's amazing, guys. I really appreciate that. We get even higher. Let's get it higher. And also, as well, consider supporting the channel by becoming a channel member, whether it's level 1 or level 2. Remember, level 2 is where you can send me your sparring footage, your shadowboxing footage, and I can give you some specific things you can do, a ton of specific things you can do, as well as your fights as well. And then also support, guys. You can do a super thanks right now on this video. Go right down there. You see where it's the heart and the $sign, whether it's $2 or whatever, or like freaking, $10 or whatever, $5, like so many people have done. That support would be amazing. It would help me do more of these videos. All right. If you enjoy this video, also make sure you check out one of these videos over here, because according to the algorithm, they're exactly what you need.